In the next section, working group spokespeople report back to the plenary on a series of 3 diagnostic questions. Gordon Edgelow from North American Construction Group reports back for Group 1. Frank Z. of the Christian Labour Association of Canada reports back for Group 2. Bruce Moffat of Operating Engineers Local 955 reports back for Group 3. Alan Bruce of the International Union of Operating Engineers reports back for Group 4. Group spokespersons report back on the question, how urgent is the heavy equipment operator situation in your view? Group 1, Gord Edgelow.
What we found for the urgency of the heavy equipment, we scaled at 9 to 10 right now. Examples, there's equipment sitting due to the labor shortage. Employers can't send employees to school because they're shorthanded to begin with and they can't afford to lose another employee for the 6 to 8 week program. A lot of competition out there. Anybody that's got any experience is highly attracted from other employers. People become overwhelmed if they don't have the training that is needed. They seem to struggle if they don't know the task at hand. Employers are having to turn work down because they can't man up to do the projects. And here's a big one, your safety plummets. Unskilled labor attracts incidents, and we see that on the market. It was talked about today that, you know, the death rates have gone down due to the training increasing. The safety standards have increased, but as employers and employees, we still have to maintain that high standard. If we can't train the guys, you know, that's where the accidents and incidents happen.
Group 2, Frank Z.
The urgency of the matter is fairly substantial. And then we asked ourselves, what are the results of the consequences of not doing something now? And we felt that if it continues the way it is, the results will be the lack of product. And what does that bring up? It upsets all your customers. We have fewer profits, angry shareholders, upset employers and employees. And the employees that you do have are overworked. And so that's a major factor in not looking at this problem right now. One of the things that we also discussed was the demographics. What is the workforce built of now? And we felt we were at the 11th hour too in demographics. What's the average age of the industrial construction worker? And it's right around the age, even older that we have right here. It's right around 50, 47 actually. And so how are we going to attract new people in here? Even our girl from Keano College, Janet, said, you know, even the people that are coming back for retraining, the average age for retraining is between 30, and she says they had students as old as 60 coming in. And what are these people doing? They're looking for a second career, but even at that, you know, we're starting them off at 30, and they're still looking at a new career at 60. What does that say about the industry? There's a real movement there. All right, so demographics are really important. That's part of the urgency of the matter. The companies that we deal with specifically, the oil and gas employers, they're so busy doing what they're supposed to be doing that they haven't really got any time to train, and we felt that was a real urgent matter that we should consider. The demands are too heavy on both the employers, and when the demands are so heavy on the employers, they download, of course, on the employees. And those employees feel the stress of having to work overtime, extended hours, being away from family and friends, and burnout is a major factor. We also felt that in a lot of these cases, especially for the young people, the money is so lucrative out there that they really don't want to train. They just want to get going. They want to make the big bucks, spend it on vehicles, and not necessarily on the training. Just grab the money and run as fast as you can. And that has consequences down the road. And part of training and looking at this whole problem, I think we should be addressing some of that. Part of the urgency here too is the lack of commitment of industry as a whole. Less than 1% of the total cost of a project is spent on training. And you know the millions and billions of dollars that are invested in all these projects that we're working with. And it just blows your mind that only that small percentage is actually put into training, reinvested into the community.
Group 3, Bruce Moffat.
We took a look at how urgent the heavy equipment labor shortage is, and we're aware of just how urgent it is. There is, from the context of the operating engineers, we are having difficulty supplying people. Currently, a number of the contractors, there were contractors at our table, they're parking equipment because they haven't got enough people to run it currently. So we see the problem right now is very urgent. There is a current shortage. Up to 20% of equipment is parked. Some companies have been forced to reduce the equipment complement, take on less work because they can't get the people to do the work. We see this as being driven both by a current boom, and we see the looming problem of an aging workforce. As previous speakers have said, the average age of heavy equipment operators is in the mid to late 40s. People are going to be retiring. And there's also a component to that as well that, particularly with some kinds of equipment, people who are in their late 40s or early 50s, before the advent of air ride seats, running a scraper was a pretty serious thing to do to your body. And so it's also an industry where there have historically been an early retirement rate.
Group 4, Alan Bruce.
Well, one of the advantages or temptations of going last is just to say all of the above and walk away. But I think we had a couple of small variances in Group 4, so we'll go through it. How urgent is very. We agreed very quickly that it's urgent, and some of the issues we looked at was, if you look at the Construction Sector Council's labor market information work that's been done across the country, and here in Alberta there's a committee that deals specifically with Alberta. They rank skill shortages from a 0 to 5 scale, and they rank in the 4 to 5 category for heavy equipment operators, so it's very high. And that's not only Alberta. BC is the same, which is another market that you draw workers from for Alberta. Manitoba has the floodway project. There's projects everywhere. So it's nationwide, and it's also worldwide, the demographics and the rest. So we found this to be very urgent.
Group spokespersons report back on the question, what are the major trends, issues, opportunities, and challenges on the horizon? Group 1, Gord Edgelow.
Major trends, demographics, more technology, a lot of legislated regulations. We've got to, make sure that our operators and employees are competent, as well as the safety. Projects today, fast tracking. They want to get their profits as soon as they can. Economic boom, globalization. The issues, you got safety, equipment, costs, plus we've got nobody to train. We got experience out in the field, but the employer doesn't want to lose that experience to give that guy up to become a trainer. So, we're getting into a position in the next 5 to 8 years that a lot of the baby boomers with the experience are going to be retiring. If we don't do something now, we could be in trouble. Opportunities, off-site manufacturing, non-traditional labor, new technology with the type of equipment that's coming out. It's less physical labor required to operate. It makes it a little more attractive. Established standards and training. It was talked about today too that some companies are getting into the simulators. Some training facilities are also using simulators. We reframe our thinking, investments versus costs. We've got to train tomorrow's workforce and diversify the workforce. Challenges, demographics, retires and younger worker expectations, number of people available. The housing market has an effect on shortage of employees. People that are down east that are surviving on $35,000 to $40,000 a year, having to come out here and find a place to live and then want to go to work. Well, it's a little bit impossible. They're finding that as a wall. Remote locations, and the expense to get to the remote locations. Foreign worker challenges. You got language barriers, you've got work standards, some lack of standards, some lack of training.
Group 2, Frank Z.
We felt that the major trend was probably in the future for all of our industrial sectors is we're moving towards higher grade of technology. And moving towards a higher grade of technology also demands a lot more education, a lot more training, a lot more familiarity with that. And many people also realize that, it was mentioned a little earlier there, if you're not academically inclined, you may not be technically inclined neither. I mean, if you're really familiar or you'd love to work just with machinery, how do you deal with that abstract stuff that sits in all these computers and so on? And how do you work with that? So that's one of the trends that we have to be aware of. We saw a streamlining of industries, fast tracking, and just going down a road where we identify major trends and make them available to a lot broader sector. In the end, when you're doing training, when you get on the site, you have to train for, all different kinds of equipment, Genie or JLC or whatever you're using, let's say an aerial lift platform. But the overall trend is in equipment, it seems to be streamlining, so we should be aware of that. Also in standards and safety procedures, we see a greater streamlining and a greater gathering. And I just mentioned two organizations I've got here, OSA, which sets standards for safety and for training, and COA with its best practices. And we think that we see a stronger bond between industry and that type of organizations in the future. So that's some of the trends that we're going to be dealing with here in the future. The issues that we saw around that our industry here now, workforce mobility, the industry is asking us to move much more, to be much more resilient, just to be able to jump from here to there. And we really see that here in the last 5-10 years, and we were importing people right from across Canada. And of course now we're importing them from other areas. What does that do to our workforce? How do we look at our work here in Alberta through those eyes? Workforce mobility. What does that do to the individual? A lot of young people maybe don't go into the areas that we'd like them or where the shortages is because we're asking them to go to places where they lose contact with their family, with their spouses, their friends. And what are we doing in that particular area to solve those problems? So that's some of the issues. We also felt that just also because of the discussion we had a little earlier this morning, hands-on training seems to be very, very important. We do realize that the technical training is important, but how do we transfer those skills from our older people, and number one presenter mentioned that too, all that retiring workforce into young people so that they look at those trades as something that's very viable and interesting and something they can really get their hands on. Sometimes we will tell these young people that, if you're in road building and so on, you can drive all these fancy machines and so on and so forth, but you don't tell them about the 40 below or the rain or the mud and all that kind of stuff. And they go out there and they get disillusioned. So talking about the broad picture of how can you make a career out of this. So the transfer of skills from journeymen to apprentices. And again, I mentioned that a little earlier, only 1% of the costs go into training, and I think we should be aware of that as an issue also in the area that we're talking about this morning. And so much of our industry is profit-driven, and maybe we should think about that a little while. One of the key challenges, I think, and I think everybody in this room will agree with that, get industry on side to make it look at the bigger picture. What are we doing for our younger generation? We're here for the long haul. So get industry on side. Get industry to present itself in a more honest and a better light to a younger group of people. The high school students, by and large, are still indoctrinated to think only at, to the college and university level. And that was mentioned here this morning too. How lucrative or how satisfying can trades really be? And they really can be very, very satisfying. It's a wonderful lifestyle if it's introduced in the right way, and I think we should take up that challenge also.
Group 3, Bruce Moffat.
Under major trends, we see an aging workforce, and another reality. The heavy equipment operator trade used to recruit out of all the farm kids. And that is a shrinking population across the country. The family farm disappeared a long time ago, so agriculture is not going to supply us with a ready supply of people that were used to working outdoors in all kinds of weather with heavy equipment. So that's a trend we're seeing. We're seeing a growth in the requirement for people as well. Under issues, one of the suggestions was we just need to slow down the boom, and maybe we can start addressing some of the problems. One of the things we're seeing, as we said before, is younger people without early experience. Often it's an urban population, young people who have maybe driven a car before, have never changed oil, haven't got any mechanical experience at all, and aren't used to working outdoors. Most of their recreation these days is in front of a screen with joysticks. There's also concerns around people's expectations. A lot of heavy equipment operation is done in conditions where you're working with dirt. And it's, of course, outdoors in all kinds of weather. And the hours are often long. Most, scraper spreads are running anywhere from 10 to 12 hours a day. The old saying was you make hay while the sun shines, because you don't know what's going to happen if you get rained out and for how long you might not be working. There was a discussion at our group around safety culture and the concern that having an untrained new workforce leads to a lot of concern around safety. We talked as well about Bill C-45 and new occupational health and safety regulations, and how that has changed the awareness in the industry. And we need to, there was discussion about sort of over-regulation and under-regulation around that, and it certainly has changed the perception of liability and responsibility in the workplace around training. Under opportunities, there's certainly been a significant change in the technology that is used in heavy equipment operation. Cranes are a very good example of that, but it runs throughout the industry. And so you do need more technical skill. We see there's an opportunity in government recognition. We had discussion around what happens when you professionalize an occupation. And having government recognition, certification of the heavy equipment trade in other provinces has been very successful in having people recognize that they have something when they're a heavy equipment operator, that they have a ticket, they have certification, and that encourages more people to go into the trade. It just professionalizes the industry. Having formal processes around that training, we see, will strengthen and retain the workforce. We talked in terms of the opportunities around the female workforce and First Nations people. And very definitely concur with Lynn's comment about women being excellent heavy equipment operators. Certainly that's the experience that the operating engineers has had. There are very definitely challenges for heavy equipment operators, particularly in road building industry where it's a mobile industry. Workplaces change from day to day, and it's nowhere near public transit. So transportation issues and childcare issues are a challenge there, and we need to find a way to support that. Under challenges, having standards we see as helpful in attracting a workforce, but also trying to set up a reasonable certification process, developing different levels of certification. We talked about the difference between someone who is a maintenance grader operator versus a finished grader operator, and there's a very, very big difference in terms of skill sets there. Attracting workers into the industry is a challenge. Training, as the other speakers have spoken about, finding time to train people and the liability around training people. One of the things that happened with the new occupational health and safety regulation was both workers and supervisors became very nervous about signing off on any paper saying that someone was certified, because they were afraid that if something did happen to that person or the equipment that they were running, that they'd be held responsible. So that's a concern. There's dynamics of the workforce around camps and schedules. Things we talked about was the reality of a mixed gender workforce and having to change camps around that. We were talking as well about general impressions of the industry, that there's this notion of heavy equipment operators as, being a bunch of rednecks out on the road job, and how we change that impression. and how we promote the opportunities, because being a heavy equipment operator it's a very lucrative industry to be in. You can make a very decent living. Certainly if you take a look at the work that's going on around Edmonton, you can be a heavy equipment operator and never leave town. And so it's not like necessarily some of the other trades where you may be expected to find most of your work a long ways from home. We were thinking that we should be promoting the opportunities amongst high school students and promote it as a career and focus on the technology.
Group 4, Alan Bruce.
Our major trends, demographics. One of the things we discussed was in 2011, and this is a worldwide phenomenon, for the first time in the history of the world, there were more people leaving the workforce than entering the workforce. So we haven't hit the crunch yet, and we've already got the issues that we've got. And for Canada, some of the research shows that 2016 is the year when the baby boomer bulge really starts to move through the system. So it's very soon. Those dates seem very far away. They're very quickly coming upon us. Another major trend was the complexity of the technology. That was spoken to in some of the presenters this morning. More skills needed, longer training, and we see that as a trend that's going to impact how we have to deal with the issues. Some of the issues, training technologies, partnerships, immigration, looking at short-term versus long-term and how we deal with that. And opportunities also, these more opportunities with training technologies. We need to look at alternative training delivery where it works. Look at partnerships. When we talk about the capacity of the public institutions, maybe there's opportunities for partnerships with other organizations that are doing the work, and the opportunities in immigration. Challenges on the horizon, essential skills is an area, and also expectations. The employer has an expectation that the worker is going to have a certain work ethic and work to a certain level, and the skills and motivation may not be at the level, so matching those expectations versus the reality. The capacity of the public institutions and others we think is a challenge. The adaptability of the industry on retention and recruitment issues, the different communities, very much an area where we need to work. And another challenge is there enough for expanding business?
Group spokespersons report back on the question, what are the major risks to a stay-the-course approach? Group 1, Gord Edgelow.
What are the major risks to stay-the-course approach? Well, it's proven we are in trouble. Safety issues, your productivity falls, economic downturn, outsourcing work, loss of dollars, equipment failures, loss of reputation, loss of investments, and then there'll be no knowledge transfer.
Group 2, Frank Z.
What are the major risks to staying the course as we have it now? That was mentioned also in Group 1, safety, we feel was a very strong factor if we don't change some of our ways. Economic impact. If we don't get some of the young people and broaden our work base, all these 50-year-olds are going to go to Hawaii or go in the sun and retire, and no roads to Mecca will be built, of course. Foreign workers was the last item. If we can't cultivate a culture of workers within our own province or even with our own country, we're going to end up going down this foreign workers road. And there's been a lot of discussion here in the last year on that. And some of it's been satisfactory, some of it hasn't really been very satisfactory at all. So those are some of the things that we're dealing with even as we speak.
Group 3, Bruce Moffat.
The major risks to a stay-the-course approach is just more equipment parked and safety, injuries and deaths increasing. One of the realities is that historically we had people at the table talking about how they learned how to run heavy equipment, which was, do you think you can turn it on? Play with it for a little while. One fellow was describing how he spent a little bit of time in the morning trying to set up a crane and later that afternoon was booked out on a job. That kind of training, of course, isn't acceptable anymore. The potential with a heavy equipment operator for serious injury for both the operator and the people around them is very high. And so with our growing awareness and focus on safety in the province, if we don't do more training and don't pay more attention to making sure we have properly qualified people, we can look at increasing levels of injury and death as we bring more people who are unskilled into the industry. Certainly there's going to be impact on the economy in terms of projects on hold. We're already seeing that the labor shortage is impacting a number of the oil sands projects currently. And we're seeing increased costs and more of a reliance on technology and training.
Group 4, Alan Bruce.
The major risks, limits to growth was spoken, I think, by everybody. The economy, there's lots of capital out there to be invested, but if there isn't the human resources available, then you'll see the lack of investment, and that's a huge impact on the economy, and that impacts our standard of living and a lot of other issues. The safety issue has been well documented. We talked about it. The liability issues, insurance, personal liability, the corporate liability under C-45, those type of issues. The maintenance of our infrastructure. That's something that's probably already hurting in a lot of areas. Heavy equipment operators are being drawn out of the, say, the city workers and going to work in a construction area with higher wages, the greater ability to change. Attraction and retention issues, we see a major risk if we don't deal with it. And we talked about the designation, having a credential for the heavy equipment occupations. Most of the heavy equipment occupations aren't designated as a trade. And if you look at when a fellow from NATE spoke this morning and he talked about how many people are going into welding and into electrical, there's no shortage of people going there. One of the reasons they're going there is because they have a credential that's portable and they can move with it. So that's something that's important, and it could be a major risk if we don't find some credentialing mechanism. Burnout was talked about, and the loss of people from the industry because they're working so long of hours if we don't have an ability to train people up. And employer engagement, a huge issue. We discussed a little bit, Canadian Apprenticeship Forum did a recent study, 2 studies, one under the promotion project, one on the return training investment, and both of them showed about an 18% of employers that could employ apprentices did. So there's a huge opportunity to engage more employers, a longer term vision, and that's in apprenticeable trades. And I think that you would find that there would be even less employers where it's not an apprenticeable occupation and there's not the same infrastructure to support employing of apprentices.